bruising personally, but for the party, it wasn't the end of the world, as some journalists have written. We halve Labour's majority. It was only ever sitting number 72 on our hit list anyway. I would love to have won. I'd love to be in the House of Commons now. Wasn't to be. It isn't the end of UKIP, and UKIP will go on from strength to strength.
It's quite an optimistic way of looking at the result, though, isn't it? I mean, it's the fifth time you've tried to be an MP, the fifth time you failed. Yeah. You were running in Brexit Central against a Labour Party that is in problems, to say the least, and you still couldn't win. Well,
look, the reason why we didn't win was because the Conservative vote held up in a way that we didn't expect. We also expected the Liberal Democrat vote to be bigger than it was, and we thought that they'd take more votes from the Labour Party. But as I say, the big one is that the Tories didn't switch, and that's because Theresa May is going through this honeymoon period at the moment, where she's talking the talk very well, and it's harming our vote. But that honeymoon period won't last forever. I think once Article 50 is triggered, I think once we get into the meat of the renegotiation, she will begin to barter things away, such as fisheries. I think we may well end up still paying a membership fee into the European Union, and the Conservatives need to know that UKIP will be there if that happens.
At the same time, your personal reputation has taken a huge battering over the last few weeks. Your opponents are trying to paint you as a fantasist, a compulsive liar. And to be honest, you have provided them with some ammunition. If you look at some of the false claims that have been made about you, that you lost close friends at Hillsborough, that you used to be a professional footballer, that you're on the board of a charity, what's going on?
Well, I'll deal with these one by one. As for the board on the charity thing, I was asked back in 2009, the charity at the time okayed the press release, so I don't know what's happened there. That isn't our fault. As for the close friends at Hillsborough thing, that went up on my website in 2011. I hadn't checked my website. I didn't know it was there. My press officer offered to resign as a result. I refused to accept it because, in the end, it's my responsibility, and I tell you, it's my fault. I should have checked. I didn't know. However, the smear campaign that started the week before, and the suggestion that I wasn't actually at Hillsborough, even though I've given evidence to Operation Resolve and I've said I'd be prepared to stand up in court on this, even though we provided witness statements to a national newspaper, was a coordinated and organised hit job on me, and it happened because we were standing in the by-election.
You say it's a coordinated hit job, but those claims were on your website. I mean, you can see why Labour MPs pointed that out.
Well, hang on. I mean, one of the other accusations is that I've claimed to have a PhD. I've never in my life claimed to have a PhD. You go through the records, no one's ever seen me call or heard me call myself Dr. Nuttall. That came from a LinkedIn page that wasn't even mine.
But there were false claims that were on your website and in your name on interviews.
Well, the charity one wasn't a false claim. The professional footballer one was a mistake, because I did play at Tranmere from the age of 13 to 18 but never signed professional forms. And the Hillsborough one, I failed to check something, but I want to put this in perspective. I didn't lie about weapons of mass destruction. I didn't send anyone into an illegal war. I didn't say anything racist. I've never been caught in a paedophile gang or anything. The fact is, I failed to check something which went up on my website in 2011, and I just think people need to take some perspective. And what's happened is that this story has been manufactured to roll on because it suits certain people with a political purpose.
So you could argue then that you're not lying, but you're just unprofessional for not checking your website.
Well, not unprofessional. Again, it was back in 2011. I didn't check, and for that, I am sorry. It's my fault, but again, I think we need to get a bit of perspective on this.
You've also, of course, got to deal with some pretty big personalities in UKIP, to say the least. That's probably the polite way of putting it. We've seen Aaron Banks, one of your party's key donors, saying that he's going to run against your only MP. You've seen Nigel Farage describe Douglas Carswell, that MP, as a Tory party posh boy. What on earth's going on? It sounds like a civil war.
Well, it hasn't been a good week for UKIP. I mean, I went away after the Stoke by-election, and as they say, when the cat's away, the mice have certainly played. I'm back now, the cat's back, and, I'm going to sort this out. The fact is, I was elected with the biggest mandate in the history of UKIP on November the 28th, calling for unity. And that's what UKIP needs to go forward. It needs to hold its nerve, it needs to come together, and UKIP needs to stay on the pitch, because if it does, the benefits that we will reap will be massive, because once these Brexit negotiations begin to fail, and as I said, Theresa May starts to barter away certain things, UKIP will go through the roof when it comes to the polling.
So what are you going to do then? Because in any other party, if someone was openly plotting to remove the single MP, they'd be thrown out, they'd be stripped of their membership. Are you running the show, or is it Nigel Farage?
Oh, no, I run the show. I mean, let's be perfectly clear. As I say, I've got the biggest mandate in the history of the party to do so. I mean, there's been accusations made against Douglas Carswell that he didn't try to get Nigel Farage a knighthood. At the behest of myself, the party chairman, met with Douglas the other day, and we now have it in writing from Douglas that he did speak to the right people and he did lobby for Nigel to get a knighthood. I've lobbied myself. I mean, I've written to the people that matter. I've tried to get Nigel Farage a peerage, and I think it is a disgrace that he hasn't been honoured in one way or the other, considering when you look at some of the people who do receive honours. Nigel Farage is the most influential British politician of the 21st century, because if it wasn't for him and it wasn't for UKIP, we would never have got a referendum and we would never have got Brexit.
So did Nigel Farage and Aaron Banks tell you then before they moved against Carswell?
No, because I was away. I went away after.
But they could have called you up, couldn't they?
But I was out of contact. You know, I went away and I've come back and I've walked into this. But the fact is, you know, Douglas has put it in writing now. It will now go to the national executive of the party who make those decisions. And, you know, I want Nigel to be involved in UKIP. I want Nigel Farage to be front of house because he's one of the best communicators in British politics. And as I say, he should be given an honour, he should be given a knighthood, because the things he's achieved in politics have been massive.
Are you worried, though, about these rumours of Douglas Carswell potentially defecting to the Conservatives? Is that something you want to stop happening?
Well, Douglas has said that he's 100% UKIP. I never want to see people leave the party. And people aren't leaving the party, actually, since I've taken over. Party membership hasn't fallen at all. In fact, we're up in the opinion polls. I think when I took over, we were on 12%. We're now on 15%. So we're going up. I mean, this isn't really a party in crisis, as the media like to call it.
It's not a party in crisis.
You know, no, it's not. No. Do you know what, Sophie? I've read UKIP's obituary written 100 times. And I remember when the party really was in crisis. I'm an old hand at this. 2006, 2007, we were on 0% in the opinion polls. We'd had the fallout of Kilroy Silk, and there was a chance then of UKIP disappearing. A party that is on 15% in the opinion polls, has great things to look forward to in the future, is not in crisis.
At the same time, though, you've had, whether it's fisticuffs in the European Parliament, to some of your major figures... Allegedly. Yes. Whether it's major political figures trading blows on Twitter. I mean, at times, you must admit, it's looked a bit of a circus, hasn't it?
It hasn't looked good. It certainly didn't look good, actually, in the autumn. I think once I took over on November the 28th, we smoothed the waters and there wasn't a problem. The party was unified since the result of the by-election. And I went away. It's sort of broken out again. I'm now back. I've got to get it under control, and I will get it under control.
Some people will say, do you really need UKIP right now? Because Theresa May is delivering on Brexit, she says. She's taking the UK out of the single market. If the polls are to be believed, then people actually think she is delivering. She's doing a good job. What's the point of UKIP?
Look, I mean, many of her speeches sound like UKIP conference speeches at the moment, but she's always been very good at talking the talk, Theresa May. But if you look at her record as Home Secretary, the proof is in the pudding that when it comes to walking the walk, she generally fails, whether that is getting hold of radical Islam or whether that is cutting the immigration figures down to the tens of thousands, which she said she was going to do. In her last year as Home Secretary, a city the size of Newcastle upon Tyne came to this country net. That isn't a success. And I don't believe, for one, that she will deliver the Brexit that people really voted for on June the 23rd. And that's why UKIP has to stay on the pitch to ensure that it is delivered.
We talked a lot about the politics. I'm quite keen to talk about the personal impacts of the last couple of weeks, because politically it's been pretty bruising, of course.
Yeah.
Personally, it must have been brutal. I mean, how has it been for you and your family?
Well, it's been quite difficult, to be honest with you. The harassment of my family is something I was never prepared for, and they certainly weren't prepared for. You know, when you have your 86-year-old grandmother having a camera shoved in her face while she's standing there in her dressing gown, whether you've got your widowed auntie being harassed, whether you've got your parents being harassed, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. However, and I said this in my conference speech, I won't let it break me, because if it breaks me, it breaks UKIP. And I'm more determined now than ever to ensure that UKIP goes on from strength to strength. See,
beneath all that, though, you must have had a wobble. Have you ever felt like packing it all in? Well,
do you know, some mornings you do wake up and you think, you know, do I really need this? But, you know, I said when I became UKIP leader I was doing this out of duty, and I have a duty to ensure that Brexit means real exit.
The Hillsborough allegations, of course, must have been personally very painful as well, for someone who is a Liverpudlian, someone who's a Liverpool fan. For lots of people who were at Hillsborough, that day will have been ingrained in their memory. Can you talk us through what it was like for you?
Well, I was 12 and a half. And, you know, it's something which I don't really talk about that much. You know, I was there with my father and my uncles, and we were in the upper tier of the Leppens Lane end. And as I say, I've given evidence to the police on this. I've spoken to the people that matter in Liverpool about the situation. And it is quite clear, you know, I was there on the day, and any scurrilous accusations that have been made that I wasn't there and I've lied about being there are quite frankly part of a smear campaign.
Has it been a deliberate decision not to talk about it? Is that because it's painful or...?
Well, do you know, I just wanted to get on with my life. You know, as I say, I was 12 and a half. You know, I was a young boy who'd gone to watch a football match with his family, and, you know, witnessed things that no child, I suppose, of 12 and a half should have to witness. But I will say this, I didn't witness the worst of it because, thank God, you know, my father was an experienced matchgoer, and he realised pretty quickly that something was badly wrong, and I think we were probably one of the first to leave the stadium.
I've always seen you, in a way, as a bit of a reluctant leader. It's almost as if you put yourself forward once there were no potential candidates left in UKIP's ranks, and I just wonder why that is. Is it because you knew you had some skeletons in your closet? Is it because you knew that you were going to take over a basket case of a party?
No,
what was that?
No. I mean, look, I've given my life to Brexit, my political life, and I just thought once Brexit had happened, and, you know, I'd been the deputy leader for 6 long years, that it was time for Nigel and I to hand on to the next generation. We tried to do that. It failed quite spectacularly. And then one thing was going to happen one or two things was going to happen in October, and that was either Nigel Farage came back full-time as leader, or I stepped up to the plate to do it. And Nigel definitely wasn't going to come back as leader, and therefore it was my duty to ensure that UKIP remained a political force in politics.
So a duty rather than a personal choice then, really?
Well, it was my duty. I'm not going to deny that. I wanted to ensure that UKIP was there to make sure that Brexit was really Brexit, to ensure that people got what they voted for on June the 23rd. But equally, I still believe UKIP has a great opportunity in working class constituencies to replace the Labour Party. This is going to be a long-term project, not a short-term project, and that's why the Stoke result might be a dent, but it's not fatal.